Hello and welcome to Living a Culture of Life podcast by Human Life International. I'm your host, Colleen, and I'm joined today by Father Boquet. Welcome to the podcast, Father.
Oh, great to be back with you, Colleen.
It's great to be here. It's great to have you here. I'm really excited to be talking about our topic today, which is basically like is the role of spiritual leaders in solving the demographic winter that we're in right now. And you wrote your recent Spirit and Life article on what Patriarch Kirill
hmm
is doing in Russia to try to encourage moms to choose life. So could you just explain for our audience what he's doing?
Sure. And so hopefully people will have a chance to go back and read the article in its entirety, just to give a little, context and also some
Hmm.
history, on the issue of abortion in Russia. And so what Patriarch Kirill is doing through what's called Hello Mom Project
Hmm.
is writing letters to mothers who are visiting their doctors in hospitals and gynecological appointments and really aiming at those who are just in the very beginning of their pregnancy and in facing decision making. And we know that very tragically in Russia, as in much of Europe and the Western world, very abortion minded, where abortion itself is considered always a viable option. The
Hmm.
patriarch is intervening because one, we have low birth rates in Russia.
Hmm.
We have a demographic problem in Russia. And so the assault on the family is, very much obvious as low birth rates now, smaller families. It affects so many things. And so the patriarch is intervening, as many others are doing now, to
Hmm.
say, let's pause here. Welcome life, choose life, open yourself to the beauty of life. And he approaches it both from a spiritual and from a just a practical, the benefit to society and the common good, which is still spiritual.
Hmm.
But it's to me, I thought it was an excellent way. And the letter he wrote, and that was sent to the ladies in the hospitals, the moms, is
Hmm.
very beautiful in the sense of his encouragement, letting them know that they're not alone, that there are people there to participate with them. He uses the word participate, which I think is a great word, which means to walk with them, to help them, to be there present, to be present for them,
Hmm.
and that to love their children as God loves them, and to welcome a new soul into this world, and not to be afraid of that. So it's a very beautiful intervention from the patriarch in this conversation, which people have now treated as something normal.
Hmm. How do those letters get to the women? Like, are the public hospitals just like, yeah, sure, we'll have this like letter from a religious figure to give to women, or
Right.
like, or is it only at? I'm assuming he's Orthodox, so is it only at the
Correct.
Orthodox hospitals? What does that look like?
So it's both and in the sense of, so there are, state-run hospitals.
Hmm.
Some of them are going to be maybe more owned by, local Christian communities, or maybe run by the
Hmm.
Orthodox Church itself, some of the religious communities. But this one, again, St. Alexius, if I remember the original story where his letters went in the first attempt,
Okay.
kind of a first approach of sending letters out. But I know there are 16 different regions that now Hello Mom Project is aiming at. So I imagine these letters are not being aimed at one hospital alone.
Hmm.
Based on the articles I was seeing and some of the comments, that it's really going to be sent out. And it's really given to the hospital itself, to the OBGYN department, to give out to the ladies. And having been in many of the Eastern European countries, and here in the United States, obviously it's very hard for me to go into a clinic, into a Planned Parenthood facility or a hospital that's performing abortions,
Hmm.
and to be able to interact. But I will tell you, I've been in those moments in Eastern Europe where you can actually be in the room or in the waiting room area, or actually walk into the room with the moms and
Yeah.
interact with them and talk to them and be able to address a topic that's very difficult for them because they're dealing with so many factors. But to be able to talk to them and to have a face that they can talk to and
Hmm.
ask questions of. And I can tell you, having been in those moments, a good majority walk out with you,
Hmm.
and because they see they're not wanting to be there. As we've talked in many podcasts, moms don't want to be in that situation, and it's because they're facing difficult pregnancies, abandonment, betrayal of the father, families pushing them, doctors pushing them. And
Hmm.
so, but when you show them that there is another path, and that's what the patriarch is talking about. He's saying this doesn't have to be the path. And obviously, he's working against a mindset, that's now over 100 years old in Russia.
Yeah.
no previous Soviet Union, that, is the first one to legalize, in a sense of pushing abortion in a global market.
Mhm.
And so it's a mindset that's very entrenched, and people have so normalized the act of abortion that it's just treated as, I might say, I don't want to compare it to breathing, but it's just in the sense that people just don't think that anything of it. It's
Mhm.
just, this is, I can't do this, and so this is what I'm going to choose. So he's intervening in
Mhm.
that moment, in that decision making moment, and just affirming both the blessing of being a mama and the
Mhm.
blessing of being of a child. They're both
Mhm.
blessings. And so I thought that was quite beautiful, as
Yeah.
he talked about that it's a blessing to be a mom. No
Mhm.
matter what the circumstances, no matter what the difficulties are, there's a blessing here in you and in your child. And so don't be afraid of that blessing.
That's beautiful that he's doing that, and it's beautiful that the hospitals are receptive to having these letters available, because that was kind of the first thing that struck me was, like you said, you can't walk into a Planned Parenthood and talk to the women there,
Right.
and just, like, trying to it's just kind of mind-blowing to realize that there's places in the world where they're actually, like, want to encourage women to have children. Even if the cultural mindset is pro-abortion, the fact that these hospitals are even willing to allow this conversation to happen is, I think, a hopeful sign.
Well, I remember my last time in one of the Eastern European countries was meeting with the chief of staff. And I remember this beautiful doctor, female doctor, was sharing with me that, the doctors themselves are not in favor of this act of abortion. They
Mm,
they they see the value of human life, and many of the doctors don't want anything to do with it. But because it's legal, because the mindset is there, because of the pressure of government and the pressure of policies and programs, so they really want
mhm,
pro-lifers in those moments because they're looking for the ways to support women. They're looking for ways to welcome life.
mhm,
And so what I've found is there's an openness,
mhm.
and because they also see the outcome. I
Yeah.
mean, even put aside the demographic winter, all the numbers we've talked about several times in our podcast, and maybe, my articles have been more common lately on the topic because it's a topic that needs to be brought up, and many people are not talking about this.
Elon Musk is.
Yes, but the idea is, but
Thankfully.
put that economic aside for a moment, and just the idea that, what does it say about a society, about a culture,
Mhm.
about our framework when we devalue human life?
Yeah.
And I believe that's what the patriarch is getting underneath, along with the Hello Mom project,
Mhm,
and like many pro-lifers around the world, is getting under the conversation that, people have so normalized, and saying, well, there's nothing normal here. This is a human being we're talking about. These are two lives that we're talking about,
mhm,
and both lives are impacted by this one decision, and harm to her, the mom, and the harm to the child. And of course, the harm to the child is much graver because the
mhm.
child dies.
Yeah.
And so to bring the conversation up is to bring it into the public conversation, to
Mhm.
make people look at it again and become resensitized
And
to this.
not just saying, "Oh, you should have a children to boost the birth rate," or "You should have a child to get the X, Y, or Z incentive." It's
Right,
saying, like, "No, this is actually a blessing, and you should have a child."
right, right.
Is he doing like, what is the Hello Mom Project? Is it simply these letters, or is there more to it than that?
Yes, from my reading of the various explanations of the project, it begins with these letters, and then the letters are then the follow up. That basically is now bringing moms to the places and to the various groups and organizations that are established to be able to help them,
Mhm,
through that journey, i.e., pregnancy care centers, maternity homes, and the various things that we here in the United States and many other countries have available to women in need. And so
mhm,
whatever that need is, this is what the Hello Mom Project is doing. One, getting, first of all, a letter to her.
mhm,
And especially, think about this. I mean, if one of us got a letter, take the subject of abortion out, but to get a
mhm.
letter from your patriarch, to get a letter from the Holy Father or from your bishop, is something quite special. And imagine when they see the letterhead and they see the envelope, and I never saw a picture of how. I saw a picture of the actual letter, so
Mhm.
I'm not sure how it's presented, in
Yeah.
that moment. Is it just a letter handed out, or actually, or and I couldn't ascertain that from what I read. How was it given? Is it the doctor? My impression was that it was the staff, that
Okay.
this was brought to the staff. The staff welcomed the opportunity, and because it came from the patriarch, and because the local government officials are in favor
Mhm,
of it and supportive of it, so there's no quote harm to the staff, right?
Mhm.
And so they're happy to give these out, and
Mhm.
so all of a sudden they're now presenting to women a positive, something good, something that will really benefit them and benefit our society. And so I think that's quite lovely. And I imagine when they first read it and they see that the patriarch is responding to them, he's speaking to them. And I love the tone of the letter. It really, to me, when of course, I had it translated, so I'm reading the
Mhm. I
translated.
should have gotten the text before this episode. I wish
Yeah,
I'd thought about that.
but I love the way that he speaks. He is joyful. His
Mhm.
tone in the letter is joyful. A father. He's speaking as a father, a spiritual father,
Yeah.
to his daughters and to the granddaughters, if I may, and grandsons that are in the womb. And he's speaking to them. I'm happy for you. I
Mhm.
am joyful for you. And let us share in that joy with you. And
Yeah.
so, and yes, as I mentioned in my article, there could be many reasons why the patriarch is intervening,
Mhm.
right? There's no doubt. There's many reasons,
Yeah.
but he is a father. He is the spiritual father of the local church, and he's responding, to his daughters and their families in need, and
Yeah.
that's something quite beautiful.
And do these go to every woman who comes into the office or is only the ones that are considering abortion?
No, as far as from my reading, it's
Mhm.
actually given to women who are abortion minded.
Okay.
So as far as what I have read, and because that's how they're
Interesting.
directed. So now maybe they are given letters written a little differently,
Yeah.
because the letter is written in such a way that it's addressing be open to life, welcome life. So basically, he's writing to women who are thinking a
Yeah.
mindset. Maybe there's another letter I didn't see, but maybe there's another letter just to women in general, moms coming in, congratulations, because they're there because they want to welcome
Here's
life.
your positive pregnancy test and a letter from the patriarch.
Right. But it just makes me think of, of what bishops and what priests and really just generally in people who are in our great movement. This is
Mhm.
something that maybe we ought to be looking at. I know it's not unique because I've heard other stories and other
Mhm.
situations like it, but this is the first one that really caught my attention, and especially in the demographic situation and crisis
Mhm.
that Russia is facing,
Oh,
like
yeah.
like the majority of Europe.
And I'm pretty sure that Putin and the government is also trying to do like have incentives and all of that as well.
They
So
are.
it's kind of coming along with this push on the government side to try
Right.
to encourage men and
Yeah,
women
because
to
President
welcome
Putin has
children.
been very, very vocal on this, and
Mhm.
along with local leaders throughout the country. And I've written on this several times as well. Now, those incentives, as we've talked about, are not
Mhm.
working. As many had hoped. Doesn't mean they're
Mhm.
not working. They're not working to the degree in which they would have liked to seen the
They're not gonna
outcome.
single-handedly fix the problem.
But together, because we know government is part of the problem that
Mhm.
created this issue, and so government is not necessarily the solution.
Well, but the thing is, like, if the government is trying to encourage this in the first place, I feel like that opens the doors for hospitals to be willing to hand these out without fearing some type of
Right,
repercussion.
right, right.
Like, I think you'd face a lot more legal battles trying to do something like that here in the United States, especially with, like, public health,
Correct.
like, in those centers than you would if the government itself is trying to actively encourage this as
I think
well.
what works to our advantage here in the States now is that abortion is no longer protected by our federal law or our
Mhm.
federal. So now you might have greater opportunity for intervention. And this has been one of our arguments, for decades is presenting women, with all the information they need.
Mhm.
Not that any of us in this podcast are in favor of abortion by any means,
Mm-mm.
but to present to women the full story
Yeah.
and give them the information which is never really given to them, and especially not like in this situation where a
Mhm.
letter is given to them and then points them in a direction that would be of assistance to them,
Mhm.
and then basically connecting them to those various organizations and groups and that are out there to now take this forward. And so these are the things that you really are. So I'll be interested to see, if there's ever going to be something written,
Mhm.
what happens next? What's been
Yeah.
what's been the percentage? What's been the response? Now, time is going to tell us that anyway, because we'll see what happens. Because we know in countries like Hungary, where they actually we call the Easter Constitution because it was around Easter time in 2012, where they changed their constitution to be very reflective of the dignity of life, and
Mhm.
then have moved even further along since then to entrench that mindset. Life is a
Mhm.
gift. Life is something we should be protecting. And
Well,
so,
and even requiring women who want abortions to have to listen to the heartbeat,
right.
which I believe Imri and our affiliates, or like he's our affiliate there, and I believe his team was very instrumental in trying to get
Exactly,
that
and we
passed.
know that we've seen the, percentage, or at least the birth rate numbers become
Mhm.
more positive. I mean, they have a long way to go, but it shows that you can change the momentum, you
Mhm.
can change the direction.
There seems to be a huge push in Eastern European countries in general in this direction where like the spiritual and the like government leaders, all of them see the problem and are trying to do what they can to try to turn this
Right,
around. And we're not seeing a ton of success yet, but it is just interesting to hear stories from Eastern Europe that seem a lot more positive than what you're hearing
right.
here in the US or in the western part of Europe.
Well, we talked about this before too, and it's Pope Benedict, so beautifully used to write about, the role of government and,
Mhm.
and the importance of government, and government has a very important role to play, and you can see how this could be a really a positive for
Mhm.
both government and the religious communities to work together for the common good,
Yeah.
and to really undo and unravel a great injustice that's been done to women and to children and
Mhm.
to generations of people. And an article that I'm writing for, that's going to come out this coming week, is on an issue of what has been the outcome of
Mhm.
abortion, and now today to see what the other ramifications of that, and to realize that more people today die from abortion than from any other disease and illness combined.
Mhm.
And so when you look at that, and so it should be earth shaking.
Mhm.
People should stop and say, "Wait a minute, what do you mean by that?" So
Mhm.
you have to
Well,
read
and
the
that's one
article.
thing where there's even people who are like morally okay with abortion who still see the numbers and say this is too much. Like I think that's what the camp that like Robert Kennedy's in and um a bunch of other like kind of liberal-ish characters
Hmm.
who are like the I'm personally pro-life but or the I'm personally for abortion, but they still look at the numbers and they just say that's too much.
Right,
And obviously they're wrong. Abortion is never the answer. It's
right,
never an option, but at least even people with that mindset are waking up and seeing like,
right.
no, there's too many.
Right. Well, in Europe, we know that and again, you have to read the article that's forthcoming
Mhm,
and to really look at the numbers. And
mhm,
and I've been very mindful of giving links to people to go and look at the data.
mhm,
That's being promoted, or being published by the World Health Organization, or being published by the UN and some of its agencies, or other groups that actually monitor and and look at the statistics and look at the
mhm,
numbers. And we know that by the year 2100, if things do not change, the total birth rate, in a sense, that will be about 1.3. So globally, I
yeah,
mean, this is unsustainable. So I know we don't want to go down that direction, but it's just the idea that these are the kinds of things that the patriarch, no doubt, is
mhm,
very keenly aware of.
yeah,
He, along with the government, that's been talking about this now, at least from that I've been following for about 5 years now. It could be longer,
mhm,
but and very intentional in the sense of what I've been seeing in writing, seeing various ways of governments incentivizing,
mhm,
welcoming children, welcoming family life. So I think this is just a continual direction.
mhm,
And by bringing the patriarch, who's not been absent in this because he's already been in this conversation for many years, but this Hello Mom project is something that this is the first time I've seen it.
mhm. Is it a
Um,
new project? It's a new
it
initiative
seems to
then?
be. It may not be, and maybe this is the first time it makes a headline,
Okay,
and it could be the case
yeah,
because of the demographic issue in
mhm,
Russia. That maybe this is now made a headline because people maybe are looking, well, what's happening? How are people addressing this?
yeah.
So it brought the article to bear.
Well, there's also the patriarch in I think it's Georgia, I don't remember his name right now, who offered to be the godfather of any third plus child that's born, and he
Right,
baptizes them all himself and does,
right,
like, mass
right, right,
baptisms. And so that's another, like, obviously, again, Orthodox, but another, like, religious leader who is
right.
trying to use his, like, personal
Sure.
like, personally be there to actually encourage these
Right,
couples and not just say, "You should do this, and I'm removed
right.
from it," but actually, like, step into that role.
Archbishop Nowman in Kansas City, Kansas, actually offers to baptize the third
Mhm.
child. It doesn't mean he
Interesting.
won't baptize the second or the first, but he's been publicly said, to encourage, just to
Yeah.
encourage, and to go against the narrative,
Mhm.
of two children is enough. Just to open the door to be open.
And I'm sure that's a personal sacrifice on behalf of any bishop or like spiritual leader
Mhm.
too. Like if you have a lot of couples doing this, that's like you're praying for these children or
Right.
you're having to schedule these baptisms. And so the fact that he's willing to make some type of personal sacrifice because he believes this is something worth sacrificing for,
Mhm.
then also provides this model of like you can welcome these children. It's worth, like, obviously the parents have a much greater sacrifice, but
Right.
it still shows like you have like a little bit of skin in the game. Like, yes, no, I'm willing to
Yeah.
actually like put myself through the hassle of trying to like have this baptism and fit it into my busy
Yeah,
schedule.
right. Well, you're promoting a great good,
Mhm.
and that everyone, but also as Patriarch Krill speaks about in his letter,
Mhm.
you're welcome in a soul.
Yeah.
First of all, she's already conceived. That little soul is there.
Yeah.
And so he's just saying, welcome that soul.
Mhm.
Welcome this beautiful child into this world and embrace life.
Mhm.
And so when we celebrate in other ways by, offering to baptize the third child or willing to, to have other incentives that may be out there, I'm all in favor,
Mhm.
of any way to go against the narrative, to challenge the narrative and to speak to the very inalienable good
Mhm.
that human life is and go against this narrative that has so created these problems today where we have so diminished the beauty of life and we treat life as a thing that
Mhm.
we can literally treat as rubbish and throw away and arbitrarily decide who has value, who doesn't have value. And what bespeaks of a culture and a people is when we value life in
Mhm.
itself. Life is a good, and life is beautiful and
Mhm.
should be cherished and celebrated. And when we have these difficult moments that people face in life, and we all face them in different degrees, and there are moments where women find themselves in great difficult situations,
Mhm.
it's up to me to step into that moment and to be part of the moment and to offer any help that I can to help her through the journey and to be there not only for that moment, to be there for the moment after the birth and to be there until she no longer has that need
Mhm.
and able and provide. And that's what I've seen globally. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what I love about our mission and the privilege that I've had, to be in various countries around the world to see with my own eyes the unique way in which we address these issues.
Mhm.
And I love it. I mean, we could spend days, sharing stories like that. But every time I see it, it's a reminder to me that God is providing for the good of His people,
Yeah.
and the patriarch raises that God provides. God will help you, and He's
Mhm.
doing it already through the patriarch. He's
Yeah.
doing it through the various agencies and groups. God is already intervening through our pregnancy care centers and maternity homes and a litany of ways. And this is God,
Mhm.
responding.
It was actually kind of reminding me as we're talking about it of Imri's program in Hungary where they're training nurses and giving them the resources so
Mhm.
that they can tell women like who are considering abortion like, okay, here's like the our card if you want to consider adoption, or
Right,
here's this pregnancy care center that can help you like get the resources that you need. And so that when these women are meeting with the nurses, they're getting this information right
right,
there from the nurse
right,
instead of having to like go seek out a pregnancy care center on their own and find out about it on the internet and do the
right,
research themselves. It's like, no, the person who's meeting you, the medical professional, is the one who's telling you about
right.
this.
And also, with just to kind of return to that letter just for a moment, the hello mom, just by just that the very title,
Mhm.
and to some people, I'm a mom. Just to someone to you're a mom.
Yeah.
Congratulations,
And not, "You will be a mom."
you
You are right
are
now.
a mom. You are a dad. The dad
Mhm.
is the dad. And so it's just that in itself kind of makes you pause. I am a mom. It's just it's so I love the way that it brings a
Mhm.
reality. And so because we almost speak like you're going to be a mom, you're going
Mhm.
to be a dad. No, you are a mom.
You're expecting. No, you have.
Yeah, that's right. And so it just brings it into the forefront. And also now, what do I do? And that's what you were just talking about, like
Mhm.
with so many of our affiliates that are involved directly in pregnancy care or in outreach, and being available, and many others that we collaborate with around the world. That's what they do. They're there to say, "Hello, mom. Now, what can we do to help?" So
Mhm.
we need more of that. We need
Yeah.
more people to be involved, and so I think that's very important.
Can you think of any other examples of religious leaders who are doing something, some type of initiative to encourage couples to have children, be that offering to baptize the children or
Mhm.
writing letters like this or doing something like in their role as spiritual leader to try to help moms and dads welcome life.
Sure. I mean, without going into any, I mean, names or specifics, I mean, I'm just generally, what I've seen different ways of approach. I mean, I've seen bishops, for example, celebrate, monthly masses,
Mhm,
to celebrate family and celebrate life, and and to pull families together, and to celebrate the beauty of being a family, and
mhm,
to and introduce people to the idea that, hey, family life is a great good. I've
mhm,
seen, where local parish priests, are again just trying to form people under the mindset, of our language, how we speak to the beauty of life, how we elevate family
mhm,
life in our own community, and what does that mean? Not just at the beginning, but throughout all the stages of life. So how do we, you know, what I've seen the most, Colleen, is taking over the narrative,
okay,
changing the narrative. Because very tragically, even within our own parish communities and our own dioceses and within our own church, we know that there's division on these issues, and,
mhm,
and very sadly, and when there should not be. That sadly, some people believe that, abortion is okay. Some people believe it's morally permissible. But by taking over the narrative and changing the way that people look is some of the ways I've seen that parish priest, religious leaders. I've seen religious communities, host monthly gatherings. I've seen that in Africa, where the religious sisters will have family day, and you go on the property, and I mean, you can hear the kids long before I see them, coming down the road. But they're celebrating,
mhm,
and another thing I've seen too is working with moms,
mhm,
who are expecting their child's birth, and how to help them. Sometimes they are alone.
mhm,
Sometimes what I've seen in different parishes and different communities and dioceses is where the bishop comes to visit that day. And so these are all expectant moms on different experiences of life. Some of them
mhm,
are there with their husbands, some of them are there with their parents, some of them are single moms. But the bishop comes, and he spends time with them, he eats with them, he talks with them, he plays with their children that are there.
mhm,
He blesses them, he celebrates mass for them. And I mean, with religious sisters who get to go where very few people get to go, and I mean by that is they enter places and get into communities. And I've seen religious sisters, go into some of the most difficult of communities, of the poorest of the poor, and actually sponsor days from moms, to teach them, and bring moms in to be
mhm,
able to help them how to be a mom, how, because many times these are young women, that have no modeling. There's no grandma. Their own mama maybe is not in their life, and so who teaches them? And
mhm,
it's fun to watch the sisters, come in and become mom to
mhm,
many of these young moms, and teach them how to bathe their child, how to put diapers on, how to clothe them, and again, that everyone's involved in a way. And I keep thinking, if I were in those kind of positions of authority, if I were
yeah,
put in a position of being a shepherd of a local church,
mhm.
what would I do?
So you just anticipated my next question of, do you have any, especially this one just feels very unique. It's not, oh, I gave a homily on this topic or I did a special parish mass about this. It feels like it's a very unique way of penetrating the secular world too, and it's, like, kind of going outside of, okay, Catholic families might hear about this family day at mass. It's saying, "Okay, this woman is sitting here. We don't know her religious background. I'm still gonna be a spiritual father and reach out to her and invite her into this, like, great journey of motherhood,"
Right.
which obviously she's already on. Do you have any, like, unique ideas of what spiritual leaders could do?
I would say from my experience and
Mhm,
what
just
I've
like
seen,
if
yeah,
you had
if
the
if
authority,
I were
just
if I were in
yeah,
that position, one, it's
imagination.
it's also, yeah, my little magic wand one, you have to get into the public conversation.
Mhm,
So you have to do something that's going to be on the public level, in the sense of something that everyone will see. So
mhm,
that requires, almost like Patriarch Kirill, you
mhm,
have to be part of something that brings you into a larger conversation.
yeah,
And so that would be the first thing I would be looking for. What would that be like?
mhm,
How would I penetrate that situation? And it could be something similar to that,
mhm,
where you actually write something or put your name to a letter that goes to all moms, or is it maybe visiting the local hospitals yourself?
mhm,
And visiting the maternity wards, thinking of ways where you're getting into the public conversation,
Yeah.
and knowing that you're not going to reach every person, but that's not the point. Well, you're trying to, of course, but the idea is that you're intervening.
Yeah.
You're throwing something into the arena for people to look at and maybe sponsor. Like
Mhm.
some of the bishops have done that I've seen. Where you're going to have a family day. And or you're going to have moments where you can say, I'll baptize your first child. I'll baptize your fifth child, whatever it is. But these are the kinds of ways that you really bring it into the public forum. And
Mhm.
obviously within the church, pastorals are very important.
Mhm.
Working with with the local priest, with the local religious and the lay leaders, and meeting with the doctors, meeting with the nurses. I believe a bishop has tremendous, or a local religious leader has tremendous ability to change a conversation, because most of the people I meet out in the world
Mhm.
in the area of healthcare have never had someone invite them to those kinds of moments. And they will tell you, how do I not know this? I've never knew this.
Mhm.
So a bishop, and I'm just going to hear from the Catholic perspective, this is where a bishop can enter a conversation and be able to really bring a message, to especially to the Catholic healthcare workers in
Yeah.
his diocese, and to reach out to them and to offer them an opportunity to hear what maybe they have never heard, and then follow up with that. Of course, there has to be follow up, and give them what they need now to move forward. Meeting with the local hospital administrators. I
Mhm.
love this in the mission field, because in the mission field, and what I mean by that is still in the developing parts of the world, where I've watched, and gone with local bishops to a meeting with the local mayor, or
Mhm.
going with the local bishop to meet the governor, and the bishop just sitting down with the mayor and having a conversation, that today's hard for us maybe to have here. But to me, that would be the ways I would intervene: is look at a way to get into the public site,
Mhm.
and to do it in a way that's obviously that elevates the conversation, brings a different narrative to the conversation, and then find a little way that would spark,
Mhm.
and it could be, like the Hello Mom project, something like that.
Yeah.
But I think only the local bishop knows that local community,
Yeah.
that's why it's hard for me to say now. But if I were in that moment, as you asked, and that's what I'm going to answer now, is that's what I would be looking for. I would be listening, observing, and then within a very short period, figuring out, okay, now what could we do,
Mhm.
to remind the public
Mhm.
life is a great good. And so how do we celebrate that?
Mhm.
And how do we enter that narrative? That's what I would be looking for.
Well, like you just said something that reminded me of a conversation we had before this podcast began, of just not just giving up the narrative to the secular framework, and how it's
Right.
important for Catholics to not just keep, okay, the secular or the religious reasons for like why life is good should are reserved for church, and then when we go to the secular world, we should only give the secular reasons, and
Right.
just being able to obviously be able to give a secular defense of why, like, obviously life is good and life
Right.
is precious, and there you can use that human logic to argue that, but also being able to bring in the religious side and keeping that in the narrative of being able to
Right.
bring that up, and it seems like
Right.
that's what you're
And and,
talking about
and what
here.
I would also encourage is the value of our maternity homes, our pregnancy care centers, our ways of intervening.
Mhm,
Again, as a bishop, you have the ability to allocate funds, to raise funds, or to go to people with the possibility of allocating funds from them to
mhm,
make this happen. I mean, the question would be, that's not what our podcast is going to be about, but how many, and it doesn't mean the diocese has to necessarily run the center, but how do we fund? How do we support them? How do we make sure there's one in every community?
mhm,
That speaks volume, when we are able to stand up and say, we are here to serve moms and to be here for families in need. And it's not, and I mean this disrespectfully, it's not just a verbalization,
mhm.
but it's realized
Yeah.
in brick and mortar. It's realized in people's interventions, very much like our Catholic charities, like so much of our St. Vincent de Paul and the
Mhm.
many other organizations out there.
Isn't there Walking with Moms in Need? Isn't that the bishop's, like, outreach to moms who need help?
It is now, that's from the pro-life secretariat's office, and
Okay.
obviously it filters down to each of the dioceses. Absolutely, but again, it's for the local community to embrace. It
Mm,
gives the guidance, and it gives the principles and the theological perspectives, but it's
yeah,
about for local people to step up,
yeah.
and that. is where, again, I admire, the bishops on that, because they did that before the overturning of Roe, in anticipation that we had a good chance of overturning a very bad law. So what's our response? And the bishops were thinking the same thing,
Mhm.
almost like Patriarch Kirill.
Yeah.
What is our response? What are we doing? And for me, nothing's more beautiful than when you hear, and especially when you hear local people speak about how the church is there for them, how people are there to help them. So, like St. Vincent de Paul, like the Catholic Charities, like so many groups working among those in need, the
Mhm.
needy, excuse me, is that this is another way, and that we have to serve for people. So I would be looking for that.
Can I ask a really dumb question? From like a jurisdiction standpoint, is a bishop a spiritual father of everyone in his diocese or only the Catholics?
Of everyone in the
Okay.
diocese,
That's
right?
what I thought, but then I didn't want to just
Right.
like imply that the bishop's the spiritual father of all these people if like technically within the church it's only the
Right.
Catholics. So, okay.
And that's why what's so beautiful about our church is our doors are open to all, and
Mhm.
we welcome and we serve all. And in our Catholic hospitals and our care centers, and so it's the idea of first outreach is to whatever that need is, and
Mhm.
respond to that need, what's morally permissible,
Mhm.
obviously. And then from there is then how do we bring our faith into those conversations, into those moments, and become ambassadors for Christ, of
Mhm.
course, in those moments. But it's such a beautiful thing to see that the bishop is the spiritual father
Mhm.
of this local community. Those that whether agree that accept him or don't, those that recognize him, those that don't, all still his children,
Mhm.
are people that he cares for. That's why we have always said abortion is not a Catholic issue. It's a
No.
human issue. Euthanasia is not a Catholic issue. It's a human issue. Human
Mhm.
trafficking, we can go through the litany. So that's why the local shepherds respond, to the common good. They respond
Mhm.
to that which affects all of us as human beings. And so these, again, are the ways that the local shepherds, the local bishops, the local religious leaders, non-Catholic religious leaders,
Mhm.
this is something that belongs to all of us. And I can tell you again, personally, having worked with local leaders in local communities, when the religious leaders come together of all different, faith traditions, come together with this common understanding that life is a great good and it must be protected, great things happen. People
Mm.
change because you can see they're united.
Yeah.
And so I return, back to my column,
Mhm.
and basically just saying what unites us is that every life is a good,
Mhm.
and no life should ever be discarded and diminished. And we need to become sensitized to the beauty of life again. And when we do that as a community, then we approach our response to to people in need comes from that foundation, that fundamental principle. That's the moral vision we have,
Mhm.
that every life is a blessing and a good. And that's something, again, that's that public narrative. People
Yeah.
need to hear it, and we need to back it up.
Mhm.
And so the pregnancy care centers, the maternity centers, these are just a few of examples, but there's so many other ways. Daycare, being able to provide good Catholic education, opening our schools,
Mhm.
where it's can not be so costly, and maybe
Mhm.
even be free, even though we know someone's got to make it happen,
I
but
think there's some dioceses that offer
they do.
like discounts or like they'll cover the tuition for like the third, fourth, or fifth
Right,
child or something
right.
like that too as a
It's
monetary
it's a way. I've
incentive.
seen countries where they'll give property. I've seen,
Mhm.
again,
Well, this was
incentivizations,
diocese though,
right?
like not the
Those are good,
government, but
but
yeah.
but also with all that is that
Mhm.
constant teaching, that constant verbalization, the narrative. Take
Mhm.
over the narrative.
Okay, so we've talked before on the show about how the demographic winter is a spiritual crisis and how the government incentives on their own can't fix the demographic winter. Do you think that by like spiritual fathers, the role of religious leaders, do you think that they can fix this demographic issue like through these types of outreaches, or do you still need the incentives too? Like, is this that they go hand in hand, or is
Mhm.
this it's a primarily a spiritual issue? So if you fix the spiritual problem, everything else will work out.
So I've said many, many times that this is a spiritual issue,
Hmm.
but it doesn't exclude the fact of things in the temporal sphere.
Okay.
So it's a both and.
Yeah.
So we are dealing primarily with a spiritual issue because there's a spiritual blindness that, no longer looks at life as the good that it is. And so how do we, again, help people to see that the inalienable dignity of life, that this life is a good in itself because we're dealing with a human being,
Mhm.
and we must respond to every act that starts with that fundamental understanding.
Mhm.
Now, how does government programs, policies, local, decision making affects that?
Mhm.
Because are we all aiming to serve that fundamental good? Do we share the same moral vision?
Mhm.
And that's always a challenge, in every age. And so we must always continue to ring that bell and never let people lose sight of that moral vision.
Mhm.
That we don't diminish one life over another life. We don't say this life has value and that life does not have value. Life is a value in itself because we're dealing with a human being. So that changes how we look at taxes, how
Mhm.
we look at incentivizations for housing. How do we bring commodities down in a sense of making them more cost, efficient and lowering cost so that again people are not, having to make decisions, about one thing over another thing on these basic issues that we
Mhm.
need, basic goods that we need. I think that's a real challenge. So that's where
Yeah.
government does play a tremendous hand.
Mhm.
How do we, lower the amount of taxes so we're not putting heavy burdens on families? How do we, again, recognize, larger families and bring those taxes that represent and reflect the fact that they need greater help? How do we, make the cost of education, healthcare, all these various things affect the family.
Mhm.
So definitely the church plays a fundamental role in keeping the narrative always front and center, and
Mhm.
she should, all right? And the role of government is not for the church to control the government, that's not what we're
Mhm.
talking about, but for government, which are people. They're made
Yeah.
up of us, all right? That we recognize, and that's where we, because of that guidance and that moral vision, shapes how we legislate, what programs, what policies, what are we actually doing, to either support the family or
Mhm.
undermine it. And
Putting
right
your money
now,
where your mouth is,
yes,
basically, where
yes,
it's like, okay, we believe this. Obviously, the church teaches this, and like now that we have this belief, how do we take that to the public sphere and
right,
transform
right.
that?
And again, one of the largest charitable organization, I don't want to call it an organization, I like calling the church an organization, but institution is the Catholic Church.
Mhm.
I mean, think of all the good that she's doing that government cannot do,
Yeah.
right? And are supplementing what government is doing, bringing in other resources. You think of how many people who are on some type of aid,
Mhm.
and but they're coming to the church and to their faith communities because what they're receiving is not enough. So
Yeah.
the church is there. She's stepping in. Who's the church? It's us, the people of God that are responding to their brothers and sisters and who are donating millions upon millions of dollars on a yearly basis in the billions probably and across the country to support their brothers and sisters, to
Yeah.
clothe the naked, to feed the hungry, to give shelter to the homeless.
To support HLI.
Yes. So these are the ways in which we serve life. So that's
Yeah.
why it's a both and. But I do and hold and that that it's a spiritual issue.
Mhm.
And when we lose sight of being made in the image and likeness of God, when
Mhm.
we lose sight of that we have a dignity that government doesn't give me, my parents do not bestow upon me. It is immutable, unchangeable. It is inalienable. It's intrinsic to who I am because I am a human being.
Mhm.
When we hold that, Colleen, as a society, it shapes everything we do.
Yeah.
And so that to me is where the church rings the bell along with religious groups around the world working together with that common understanding. Then, because think about this, and I've seen this where in great tragedies, you know, I'm seeing where the people of God, faithful people, come together,
Yeah.
right, and respond, and it causes an awakening in people. So we need to do the same thing today. So I really believe that it's not a one or the other.
Mhm.
It's a both and. But I believe with all my heart that the church really is the one, and our faith communities are the ones that take the center stage in the conversation.
Mhm.
And we always see the negative side when it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
when our religious leaders are not speaking to these perennial truths, when they're not advocating for these great goods in the public forum, or when we kind of give way to the public conversation, it is detrimental. But when our shepherds and the faithful men and women step up into the forefront, we see this in Congresses, lay faithful,
Mhm.
witnessing to the faith. We've seen people sacrifice their careers,
Mhm.
their professions for the truth in the faith.
I loved the story from Malawi a couple years ago where we had like there was a bill coming as a reproductive health bill, I think was the phrasing that they used because people didn't realize it was about abortion. And so our missionaries in Malawi went to I think it was the chaplain of Malawi's parliament and said, "Hey, by the way, this is what this is actually about." And so the next day he like met with the Catholic MPs and the next day one of the members of parliament like stood up and was like, "Hey, if you bring this bill to discussion, we're all going to walk out because it's a waste of time."
Right,
And the bill never even made it to the floor to be
right.
discussed.
So
And it was
this
because
is,
the
yeah,
Catholics were like, "Hey, no, this is what we believe,
right,
and we're Catholic, and that we're not going to discuss this. Like, this is not an option for Malawi. We're
right.
going to walk out
That's
if you
right.
try to discuss this."
That's
And
right. And
it
how
worked.
many lay men and women, are out there giving that beautiful witness every
Hmm.
day. So that, and again, that's why even within the church, it's not one or the other.
Yeah.
It's all of us working together with our shepherds, collaborating with our shepherds, and our shepherds collaborating with the people of God, and together bringing the narrative forward, just like we do in our charitable works.
Hmm.
It's not the bishop that's doing that by himself.
Yeah.
It's all of us working together to achieve that great good. And that's what we have to do here as well. So, and that's what, go back to your question to me. I know that's what I would be looking for very quickly
Hmm.
is who to work with, what groups to work with, how can we do this more, how can we do this better, what can we make
Hmm.
realize, what kind of vision can we do together,
Yeah.
and then bring it out there. Because obviously what we started with, and I know we coming to the conclusion of our podcast, Patriarch Kirill could not do this by himself.
Mm-mm.
It's a lot of people together working together for this great good. And I just ask our listeners to pray. I've already gotten a few comments, and people are saying it's a political thing, and that's why maybe the patriarch's involved. As I said in my column, there are many reasons why that I know from what I've read, and there's probably God knows how many hundred other reasons that are not in the articles that could be reasons for. To me, put all that aside, that this is a moment where the patriarch stood up, gave his voice to a great good,
Hmm.
and has now reminded us and the people of his own country of the beauty of life. I think there's a lot for us to learn from that, and maybe from us in positions of leadership to ask, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Whatever the reason may be. In the end, that made a tremendous impact. And
Hmm.
so much so that the international news media picked it up.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we hear the outcome of it someday. I'd
I
love to
hope so.
hear.
I
See like
hope
a nice
so.
little birth spike in
Love to see
Russia.
any little tenth of a percent in a positive direction can be very good and keep moving up. And we, like I said, we brought up Hungary. It's just one of many
Yeah.
that we can change this. It can be changed. But the further it gets down, in number, the harder and harder. And even though demographers will say there is a point of no return, we can what that number is, and I've heard many different numbers, but I mean, to me, we have a moment where we can move the pendulum over the next generation or so if we're willing to take the lead.
Well, thank you for this conversation, Father. This has been a really good, nice discussion about spiritual fatherhood and its role in solving the population crisis.
Mm. I hope it bears great fruit.
Thank you. And to all of our listeners, please like, subscribe, check out the ebooks that we have coming out, and leave us some comments on your thoughts on this and just let us know what you're thinking. And keep on living the culture of life. God bless.